Alright, look, at this point, I know I'm a liar, but I really am trying my best to upload more. I just got caught up with writing a project that I'm working on for Wattpad, and since my dream is to be an author one day, it's important that I build an audience for my writing too, and if you're interested in that, you should check out my 2 novellas on Wattpad now, link in the description below. But I know what you're really here for, and that is to talk about the second volume of the Pokemon Adventures Collector Edition, so without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, this volume was very interesting because most of the main story from the Pokemon games, like the Red, Blue, and Yellow games, was basically covered in Volume 1. And to my surprise, Gen 2 did not start in this volume. Instead, a lot of the conflict in this volume is between our protagonists and the Elite Four, all of whom are like absolute menaces to society, except maybe Bruno. He seems like he's kind of on the trajectory of being a nice guy. But let's start at the beginning, where we learn that Red, who rather than working on completing his Pokédex, has been doing nothing but accepting battles from trainers due to him recently winning the Pokemon League. But he has apparently gone missing after receiving a challenge from Bruno of the Elite Four, again more on them later. And Professor Oak is complaining about this to Misty, who's worried about Red's disappearance, when all of a sudden Red's Pikachu appears extremely injured at Oak's store. And I gotta say, the introduction to the story was extremely captivating because the question about what happened to Red is something that drives this entire volume, and I kind of enjoyed the way we got like bits and pieces of what happened, of the events that happened before Pikachu arrived, slowly throughout the story. Also, side note, not super major, but is this manga going to explore romance? Because this is not the first time it's been hinted at in the story. Like, because Misty's concern felt a little bit more intense than Brock or Erica's, and I just know that that's like very different from the anime in terms of like, they don't want to touch romance at all, so I'm wondering if they're actually going to do it in this manga, and if they're going to do it well. Anyway, it's shortly after Pikachu arrives that we meet our main protagonist for this volume, a Pokemon trainer named, you guessed it, Yellow, another color. Technically his name is Amarillo, but he goes by Yellow. And Yellow being a girl is supposed to be this major twist in this volume, and I'm not sure if that's going to end up being like important down the line, but like, I guess the twist got me. I just don't know how important it is for the story overall. Yellow, though, you can see right here, is an extremely cool Pokemon trainer because she has the ability to heal Pokemon at the cost of her own energy, and she can also read the minds of Pokemon, and through reading Pikachu's mind is able to understand a little bit of what happened to Red. But since Pikachu is suffering from PTSD, I'm not kidding, Pokemon suffer PTSD in this manga, Pikachu can't remember everything that's happened. We do learn, however, that Yellow is working with Green to rescue Red and will also be trained by Blue later on in this volume, and I'm just a sucker for this like whole older generation of heroes training newer ones. It's one of my favorite tropes in fiction, and I'm glad it's in this manga too, and I really enjoyed that. But basically, like I was saying at the top, the main conflict of the story is between our protagonist and the members of the Elite Four, sans Bruno, because he's a sweet boy, and every single one of them is just insane. Lorelei is straight up a psycho, hunting down Pikachu because the fact that Pikachu was able to escape a battle is something that she views as a stain on the Elite Four's undefeated record. Agatha is a little bit more interesting because like it builds upon the information we got in the games where like Oak and Agatha have a rivalry, but this manga takes that rivalry up to 11 because like she is obsessed with proving to Oak and Oak's descendants that she is better at raising Pokemon than he is. And then there's Lance, who took like the Team Plasma ideology almost, or I guess like the other way around because this manga came out first. And he believes that only strong trainers should be allowed to raise Pokemon, and he's also an absolute domestic terrorist in this volume. Like, straight up, he blows up a town, which is wild. Like, forget training Pokemon, these people are straight up murderers. But I think what makes the conflict against the Elite Four in this volume so interesting is because of Yellow's pacifistic nature. She can really feel the pain that Pokemon go through when they battle, and so she doesn't want to cause harm to any of them. So we get to watch the creativity in these fights unfold to a whole nother level, because Yellow has to constantly be thinking about ways to win the battle without harming the Pokemon, which admittedly at times leads to some absolutely bonkers outcomes. Like, some are really cool. I think, like, there's this one scene where Yellow uses her fishing pole to secretly summon a Rattata to break off a piece of ice to escape from Lorelei, but others are a bit of a stretch. Like, the Super Nerd fight in this volume is like a perfect example of that, because while I can't be 100% sure that's how electromagnetism works, the outcome of that fight was definitely a bit wonky. And on the topic of Pokemon battles in this universe, I'd really like a toll regarding the number of hospitalizations and deaths that trainers experience in this universe, because we see Yellow get beaten to an absolute pulp by various Pokemon trying to protect his team, and at one point, we see that Red took a clean kick to the rib from Hitmonlee. And I just need to know how these characters keep getting up, because either the Pokedex entries are straight up lying, or these people are just built different, because they should not be able to be surviving these attacks. But speaking of the characters in this book, I don't know how frequently the idea of recurring characters will be in future volumes, but as of this volume, I really love that Kusaka didn't really write anyone out of the story in terms of relevance or importance yet. Both the good gym leaders, that's Brock, Misty, Erica, and Blaine, all have important roles in fighting against the Elite Four in this book, and the evil gym leaders like Lieutenant Surge, Koga, Sabrina, instead of fading off into obscurity, all of them take over as the roles of the admins for Team Rocket from the games. And the way they are utilized in the whole enemy of my enemy is my friend concept in the fight against the Elite Four, and the way they are paired up with green, blue, and yellow in this intentional and actually relevant way was great. My favorite example of this is Blue and Koga teaming up to face Agatha, because of the grudge that Agatha has against Blue for being Oak's grandson, and the fact that Koga is the gym leader that takes her place in the sequel games as an Elite Four member. Green and Blue also just become so much better as characters throughout this volume. Green continues to be the anti-hero type, continues to do good things, but for her own reason, and I just love the way that contrasts with Yellow, who's one of her mentees, because Yellow is just doing things for the sake of them being the right thing to do. She's a very good-hearted person, and Green is a little bit more self-centered. And Green also carries so much of this Amongus humor, her breaking into Bill's lab to steal data to track Red's information on the PC system, only to turn around and pretend her primary intention of entering Bill's house was to warn him about the Elite Four was funnier than I would have thought, and her gag about continuously using Pokemon that cannot canonically learn Fly to fly is pretty great. Yes, seeing Blastoise fly by using Hydro Pump across the sky breaks all the rules of Pokemon, but it is amusing. Also, I'm not sure where this goes from here, but Green mentions being removed from her home, which I think is supposed to mean she's originally from another region, and when she mentions seeing a bird, I think it kind of confirms that she's supposed to be from Johto, and that bird that she saw was Ho-Oh, but I'm not sure. Blue, on the other hand, is a mix of absolute ridiculousness and surprising character growth. He has a very Piccolo or Sasuke-ish vibe, in the sense that he's the person that everyone calls upon when Red isn't around. And I've always found those characters rank pretty highly in stories for me, because I enjoy that archetype. And I appreciate that Blue keeps getting some love even though he's not the main character. What was ridiculous was his flashback backstories when he's training with Yellow. Why does Blue training with swords, and how does his training with swords allow for his Pokemon's normal type attacks to hit ghost types? I'll never know, but it is effective in showing that, unlike what we were kind of led to believe a little bit in Volume 1, Blue is not simply just naturally talented, he is extremely hardworking and dedicated to succeeding. And Blue also gets his kind of cool story where he tries to help this kid get his Haunter back from the abandoned power plant, which is where he first meets Agatha. And I guess it was cool for Blue's character arc, but I'm kind of annoyed with seeing him struggle against Pokemon like Ghastly. Him struggling against a Gengar, cool, no problem, but Ghastly is kind of insane. And what's also insane is making it this far into the video without subscribing and liking the video, so do me a favor, click those two buttons because it really helps the channel grow. Anyway, I found that this volume definitely had more disregard for the rules of Pokemon than the previous one, and while I let a lot of them slide in Volume 1, the ones in this volume made me verbally say, alright, I guess we're doing this now, multiple times. For example, I know it was supposed to be an ode to the Surfing Pikachu gift you could get in the earlier games in the series, but having Pikachu learn Substitute to create a tangible surfboard for Yellow to ride was a bit world-breaking for me. Lore-wise, however, it hasn't become important yet, but the fact that Blaine and Mewtwo have started to develop a bond that is seemingly like a partnership, I'm convinced is going to play a huge role in the story moving forward, because during the time of Red, Blue, and Yellow, the video games, not the characters, Mewtwo was considered to be the strongest Pokemon ever. And nowadays, turns out that's far from true, but to know that Powerhouse is in the story waiting to make an entrance is super interesting, and I'm excited to see how that Pokemon will be incorporated moving forward. I think that this volume, in so many ways, improved upon the first one overall. I found the pacing to be better, as Kusaka really allowing time for the Red being missing plotline to marinate was a smart move. He also did a great job making Red's return suspenseful, and while we don't know 100% of what happened, I will say that from what we are able to piece together, it seems that he's at least handling the in-universe power scaling with some level of respect. Another thing that I'm really glad to see is that the humor of the story didn't take a step back at all. Green's antics, Yellow crying over Raticate and calling it ugly to his face, and like Blaine's fake disguise being a mustache and a wig were absolutely great gags, and I hope Kusaka never stops having fun with them. The art done by Mato continues to be phenomenal as well, and continues to just perfectly fit the world and the action style that's built in this story. But while I appreciate the creativity this manga brings to the world of Pokemon, I think it would benefit from not having so many head-scratching moments when it comes to the disregarding of the mechanics that Pokemon fans know so well from the games they played. Like, I understand that it's a different universe, and I'm not saying you can't get away with some stuff, but I think Kusaka needs to be wary of just how much suspension of disbelief leeway he has. Still, I think that this manga continues to be great and just very entertaining. We haven't really explored any themes that are like head-scratching, and I don't think that anyone in their right mind could call this story deep or thought-provoking, but it is fun. Like, this volume almost for cover to cover was a wild ride, and I say that if you're looking for a fun and slightly ridiculous take on the Pokemon world, this story continues to be a must-read. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate your time choosing my video over the millions of others YouTube probably sends your way. And if you enjoyed this review, please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell, and tell me in the comments what was your favorite part of this volume if you've read it yourself. Also, if you'd like to support my ambitions to become an author, it would mean a ton if you could check out my stories on Wattpad. They're free, and I personally think they're pretty good and shouldn't take up too much of your time. And if you want to help my ego grow even more, why don't you follow me on Twitter at Jared Shaw? Would love to interact with you guys as well on there. And hopefully my next video will be coming out quicker than this one. But until then, I hope you have a great rest of your day. And until next time, peace.